You should be taking a look at the Eibach Sportline Spring Kit if you're the owner of a 2015 or newer EcoBoost Mustang and you're looking to pick up the largest drop available from a simple progressive lowering spring setup in order to get rid of as much factory wheel gap as possible without spending a ton of money on an airlift kit. Now, the installation for a set of springs isn't too tough, but it does require a little mechanical know-how and the right tools, of course, so I'm calling it 2 out of 3 wrenches on our difficulty meter, which we'll walk you through later on. Now, first things first, a lowering spring is a great way to give your EcoBoost a more aggressive appearance by dropping the ride height a certain amount depending on which set you're looking at. Now, removing some of that factory wheel gap gives your Mustang what we call a classic muscle car look. Now, this particular set from Eibach, the Sportline Kit, will drop your front end 1.5 inches while dropping your rear 1.3 inches. Convertible owners may see a slightly lower ride height from these, but it won't change too much compared to fastbacks. Now, this particular drop currently is the most you can get out of a spring kit without going into popular airlift kits that offer a ton of adjustability on the fly, but at a very costly price tag. Now, aside from looks, lowering your Mustang has a bunch of additional benefits. Now, lowering the center of gravity improves your handling performance, reduces body roll and excessive squatting during acceleration, and minimizes nosedive under hard braking. Improving the ride quality with springs will be noticeable the second you start driving on the new set, and it'll feel a lot sportier. It'll make taking corners a lot easier and plan it to the ground because of that lowered center of gravity. Now, how the ride will feel also depends on whether or not the springs you're going with are progressive or linear. Now, this set I have here, I mentioned in the beginning, is a progressive set, which basically means the springs will remain at a comfortable ride quality under normal driving conditions, but they will stiffen up or progressively stiffen up under more stress, like taking a turn quicker and harder. Essentially, they progress the harder you drive, which we all tend to do with our Mustangs, so this is a great option for the guys with a daily driver who still want that sporty feel when they put the power down. Now, on the flip side, a linear spring, not like the ones we have here, keep a consistent compression and ride feel no matter what, which is basically the better choice for guys out there who have a dedicated track car because they're more predictable. Now, the Sportlines are the more expensive set in the EcoBoost lowering spring category, but not by very much. The price for springs across the board don't vary too much, but since this offers the biggest drop and is offered by a fan favorite brand name like Eibach, the price falls right around the $260 mark for the set. I still don't think it's a bad price at all. You get a very impressive set of springs without dropping big bucks on an all-inclusive coilover suspension or without dropping super big bucks on an airlift kit. These even come with a 1,000,000-mile warranty, which if you end up passing the mile marker, then you deserve an award. But if not, then at least you know your springs are covered for the lifetime of your Mustang for any defects. Now, the installation, as I touched on in the beginning, is going to require specific tools as well as mechanical know-how. So if you're not well versed in suspension parts, then you might want to have a helping hand on deck who's more familiar with the process, or maybe even take it to a shop if you want them to tackle it for you. Now, if you are tackling it yourself, you'll need a spring compressor on deck as well as a full ratchet and socket set, a jack and jack stands, but a lift would definitely make things easier on you. Overall, 2 out of 3 wrenches on our difficulty meter. It'll probably take about 3 hours from start to finish. The first thing you want to do is get the Mustang in the air and support it on jack stands or a lift if you have access to one. Remove the front wheels and pop the hood to remove the nuts at the top of the strut tower. A tip here, I'd suggest leaving one of the nuts still on but loosened so that once you unbolt the strut from the bottom, it doesn't just fall right out. From here, you want to unclip the ABS lines from the side of the strut and spindle, which can be done with a panel removal tool or just some good old-fashioned elbow grease. Now, remove the sway bar end link from the strut next by holding onto the back of it with a wrench and working on it from the front with a ratchet and socket. Next up, you want to get the brake assembly out of the way by removing the caliper and bracket bolts holding it on from the back. Once those are out, prop the caliper up and out of the way without it hanging down on the lines. Pull the rotor off to gain better access to the bottom strut bolts. You can then loosen the nuts on those 2 bolts, but I would suggest leaving them on while you use a mallet or hammer to bang the bolts loose, at which point you can remove the nuts by hand and pull the bolts out. Now that the strut is loose, you can hold onto it in the wheel well and remove the remaining nut from the top of the strut tower and pull the whole assembly away from the car. This is where that spring compressor comes into play. This can be very dangerous if it's not done correctly, so be sure to use extra caution. You want to connect the spring compressor to the top and bottom coils on the spring and compress it. Be sure it really is secured on there because while under so much pressure, the spring can shoot out if it's not done right. From here, just remove the top nut from the strut mount and remove it, and then slowly, and I mean very slowly, decompress the spring to relieve the tension. Put the new Eibach springs onto the strut and repeat this in the reverse order. You'll compress the new spring onto the strut, attach the strut mount and tighten it down at the top nut, then decompress. You can now put the strut back into the car and tighten down the top nuts in the strut tower. Reconnect the bottom 2 bolts to the spindle and torque them down. Put the rotor back into place and then the caliper and tighten those nuts down. Replace the sway bar end link to the side of the strut and tighten down the nut to the end link, then reclip the ABS lines into place. From there, you can move on to the opposite side and complete that one. The rears will start off the same way by removing the wheels once the car is up in the air and supported on jack stands or that lift. Now you want to place your jack stand underneath the rear lower control arm and jack it up slightly, supporting the weight. From here, remove the 2 bolts holding on the bracket to the shock on the chassis. Once that disconnects from the body, you'll want to slowly lower that jack down to decompress the spring. And just like the front, this can be potentially very dangerous, so make sure you do this slowly to ease the tension off of that spring. Once it's completely decompressed, you can remove it from the suspension and replace it with the new Eibach spring. Jack the spring back up into its proper position, putting a little tension on it to raise it up enough to reconnect the shock back to the chassis. From here, you can put things back together in the repeat order and repeat for the opposite side, and you're good to go. Well, that just about does it for my overview and install. So if you're the owner of a 2015 to 2017 EcoBoost powered Mustang, you might want to check out the Eibach Sportline Spring Kit, which you can find right here at AmericanMuscle.com.